We have genuine refugees languishing in these detention centres who have been there, many of them for years, subjected to, in the words of many other human rights organisations, horrendous torture. We know that many of them are self-harming. We know that the children are facing huge psychological trauma. And yet we hear the government say, well, the policy's working, but we're going to make it even tougher for them, despite the fact that our policy's working, by introducing a draconian piece of legislation that says never ever. You make a life for yourself in another country, you become successful, you have something you can offer Australia, well, we won't let you come back. If you have family here, you may have a brother or a sister, a parent who's already settled here, who may be a permanent resident, well, you'll never be able to visit them either. I just think that's cruel, it's harsh, and I just call on Bill Shorten, why the delay? I mean, you don't need to send this off to a focus group to know that it's the wrong thing to do. Join with us. I've already spoken with members of the crossbench. Join with the Greens, and let's make sure we use this as a turning point to change this debate in this country, because we are in a race to the bottom, and just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, the government's introduced this piece of legislation.
Senator, you said there that that Bill Shorten doesn't need to consult a focus group to know what to do on this issue, but do you accept that although the Greens have been battling away against the major parties on these issues for decades now, whether it's mandatory detention, offshore detention, boat turnbacks, the whole suite of policy measures, you are in fact well behind where public opinion is on these issues, and the major parties wouldn't be pushing these harsh measures if they didn't think there was public support for them. So do you accept that you are in fact behind public opinion on this issue, and how do you try to turn that perception around?
Well, it's a good question. Look, I suspect that the majority of Australians are confused by this debate, and I also, but I know that there are many, many members of the community who stand with us, members right across the political spectrum who just know what's being done here is appalling and needs to change. I'd also say, Troy, that's why you need leadership. I mean, that's the whole point of leadership. If we're going to put every question to an opinion poll, then we should just pack up and go home. I mean, the point of having people elected to positions of leadership is that they can help lead the public debate. And we know that during difficult periods in the past, whether it be the period of southeast immigration from Southeast Asia, we had then Malcolm Fraser at the time, and indeed supported by the Labor opposition, showing some leadership through that very difficult period. Now, that's what's required here. Unfortunately, you have comments from people like Peter Dutton, who starts talking about refugees as illiterate, enumerate, taking people's jobs, at the same time languishing on unemployment queues. Now, the logic of that's got me baffled, but, you know, really blowing the dog whistle here. And instead of showing some leadership, recognising there's a big problem globally, that Australia only faces a tiny fraction of the challenge that many other nations across the world face, that we aren't doing our fair share, and that we have an opportunity to allow these people to contribute. I mean, these are people who are potentially the scientists, the engineers, the sports people, I mean, of tomorrow. These are people who make an enormous contribution to the Australian nation. They're ordinary people looking for security, to get a roof over their heads, give their kids an education. That's the sort of debate that should be happening here in Australia.
But, Senator, do you accept that Australians do want to have their borders controlled, so to speak, and did not like seeing those boats coming to Australian shores and being, being destroyed on the rocks? We remember that episode very vividly. People losing their lives at sea. The government says more than 1,000 people did lose their lives at sea. So, getting back to that core issue, which is why we're now debating this current issue about these new legislative measures, how do you actually stop that issue of people actually dying on boats coming to Australia? I know you've been asked this question many times, but I mean that remains the core issue here, and that's why the government are introducing these new measures.
Well, no, I actually reject that. I think that this debate started long before the concern about deaths at sea became a big political issue. It started when John Howard responded in the way that he did to the Tampa issue, where he accused, along with members of his government, of refugees not caring for their children and deliberately harming them. And right through the language that's being used, references to them being illegal, as I said, the comments from Minister Dutton, that's not a response rooted in compassion or care of the fate of innocent people seeking asylum. The other thing to remember, of course, is what happens to these people when we turn them back. The policy of deterrence doesn't keep people
Senator,
safe.
if I can just jump in there for a second, because you need to answer this very specific question. How do you stop people dying at sea who make a journey by boat to come to Australia? How do you stop them dying at sea?
Well, what you do, Troy, is you make sure that you create pathways for people so that they know that rather than languishing with no hope, either in a transit country or sometimes within their own country of origin, you make sure you create pathways for people. So you invest in the UNHCR processes. You give people hope that should they register, should there be an appropriate processing processing framework, that those people will have the prospect of coming here to Australia through an orderly pathway. And if you give people that option, they're much more likely to take it, rather than at the moment where they can be languishing in transit countries, they can be in their country of origin. There is simply no way of them registering with the UNHCR, of having their claims assessed and given some sense of certainty about their options. And that's the problem at the moment, is people are deprived of all hope and they take these risky journeys. But again, I just say the idea that we've implemented a set of policies that is keeping people safe is nonsense. These people are turned back. We don't know what fate is befalling them. If we deter them from coming in the first place, many of these people are facing serious dangers in their countries of origin.